Welcome back, friends. Last time we talked, Michigan was beaten down Alabama twice in the same year, once to start it off, once to finish it. It was a great way to end 2024, and we are super excited about 25. Lots to talk about Michigan football, but we also want to let you know what's going on MGO Blue Podcast as we begin the new year. Basketball coverage is rolling right along. They are kicking ass and taking names. It is a lot of fun. It's a ranked basketball team. Defend the Block radio plays. You can find all of those of Inside Michigan Basketball right here on the feed for MGO Blue Podcast. Conquering Heroes. We are scheduled to return with that one next week. That'll be January the 23rd. And a little birdie tells me that we're going to start with the softball program because they are up and running. They are also ranked in the preseason top 25. I believe they come in at 20. So there's a lot of excitement, a lot of great players added, a lot of great players coming back for Ball and her group. But we're going to be able to touch on a lot of different things throughout the new year as the winter sports are cooking along. Spring sports are starting to get fired up. But at this time, for that basketball team, when you tune in to Inside Michigan Basketball, when you hear Defend the Block, when you listen to Terry Mills, you're also going to hear Boesch, the voice of Michigan basketball. Mr. Boesch, how you doing?
I'm great. It is already mid-January. The men are 5-0 in the Big Ten. We are coming off a 3-game win streak from a football standpoint. So, yeah, rocking and rolling. This is an exciting time. Makes the snow flurries and the cold a little bit nicer, doesn't it?
It sure does. And, yeah, we got a little cold snap going here. We're going to warm up for the weekend. I know there's going to be Michigan basketball rolling right along. So, hey, it is the off season for football, which is what we are tasked with discussing here on In the Trenches.
We are, and as we get into our 7 from 77, this is one of the longer quote-unquote breaks that we've taken, but we're back. We're ready to roll. We'll kind of get into some of the plans we have for the offseason in 2025 as we go along, but let's start with our 7 from 77. And number one, think back to mid-November when we were doing some of these shows after Indiana during that second bye week, getting ready for Northwestern. And then you finish with a dominant win over the Wildcats, the win in Columbus, a victory over Alabama, an Alabama team that played a lot of guys that very well could have opted out. And Michigan won that one with, some great defense down the stretch, some opportune offense taking advantage of some field position. Just how stark do you sense the vibe around the program, not just internally, but externally, considering where this was on November 14th versus January 14th?
Yeah, when you think back, and it really kind of feels when you look back on looking and seeing that Michigan team needed one of those wins, which they got against Northwestern. That was a dominant win. It was one where you just had to get some confidence in all phases. Now, the confidence offensively didn't really carry over. They did enough against Ohio State. They did enough against Alabama. But to be able to end the season on the field on a high note, it's encouraging, especially with that performance against Alabama defensively. A lot of those guys that we saw, in fact, the majority of those guys that impact players will be back on the roster. We're going to see them in the spring. We're going to see them next fall. But everything around the program, the recruiting, the transfer portal, and all of the questions, can Sherrone Moore handle the program when you end the way that they did and you beat Ohio State, you beat Bama? It shows that, no one's going to throw in the towel. He's continuing to coach. He's continuing to address everything that they need to address. And then all of a sudden you throw on that a really good recruiting class. The number one player in the nation is now in Ann Arbor. Everybody got a lot of time to be able to see Underwood throw the ball. They didn't get to see him in a game, but they got to see him at practice. And there's a lot of talk coming out about how special he could be in this class, the athleticism on the offensive line. There's so much to be excited about for this program from the outside looking in. And it's really hard for me to give that perspective because I see everything both ways, but I do hear a lot about whether it's Michigan football alums, who we're going to have a lot more of those on this offseason here on In the Trenches. They're excited about the direction of the program, the feeling about recruiting, the way that the players carried themselves at the end of the year. Nobody threw in the towel. Everybody continued to fight. And there's a lot of excitement leading into spring ball, and rightfully so. This team did not quit. They didn't throw in the towel. They didn't say, hey, better luck next year. There's a lot of excitement about what is to come, and there needs to be some changes. We've already seen it. Chip Lindsey is in as offensive coordinator. They're moving on, and they're moving forward.
Number 2 on our 7 from 77. The ground game from Michigan against Alabama obviously has to get the fan base excited. It did against Ohio State too, but Kalel Mullings, he obviously won't be back with this team. Jordan Marshall, though, 23 totes, 100 yards. We saw some tough running from Benjamin Hall. Certainly like where he's at, and the future seems to be bright for that young man. I'm reminded of Steve Kasula's comments. Of course, Kasula was the acting OC for the bowl game when he was talking about Michigan's offense and how he might change it. And, he offered some thoughts. Yeah, it might look a little bit different, but Michigan's offense is Michigan's offense. Unquestionably, tweaks are necessary coming off the 2024 offensive showing for Michigan. Case in point, there's a new offensive coordinator in town. But it does feel like Michigan must always have a running attack. And frankly, in college and in the NFL, we're seeing the renaissance of the running game and the relevance of having really good players at the running back position. Look at the divisional round of the playoffs. You got some absolute studs.
Well, yeah. And when you look, it's the basics of football, right? It's you got to be able to control the line of scrimmage. You've got to be able to run the football to manage the clock. And you've got to, ideally, you're able to do everything well. And when everything goes to hell, you have to have you can hang your hat on and rely upon. And for Michigan, it's the run game. Whenever in program history, they've gotten away from the toughness, from the physicality of running the ball in the Big Ten, that's when Michigan has really struggled. And now that, in the last, 4 years of Jim Harbaugh's tenure at Michigan, and now started the Sharon Mora era, it's really been about being able to, as Sharon says, smash. You've got to be able to be physical up front, control the line of scrimmage, control doing up front. And if you add into that good athletes in the backfield, Jordan Marshall, Ben Hall, it's a great place to start. You go to the transfer portal, you add a couple of guys, you get in, and recruit so that you got a number of different guys. Because what did we see when Michigan was at its peak? Blake Corum goes down, but you've got other guys that can step in and play. It's a physical game. You're going to have games from running backs, from other positions that are very important, especially that running back, where they may miss a game. They may miss a half. And you've got to have a depth of talent at that position so that as an offense, you don't miss a beat. Because at Michigan, your identity is going to be physical. Your identity is always going to be running. And they use that to set up everything else in the offense.
Number 3 on our 7 from 77. I mentioned the lessons that must be taken from 2024. What must this program take from the sputtering of the offense at times this year? Because obviously Michigan's offense can't only be coming from the run game, even if I know that worked several times. What was Michigan 4-0 when they threw for under 100 yards? It's feasible, but it's not a long-term strategy.
It's not. And if you want to beat the best teams in the country, you're going to have to be able to score points quickly at times. You're not always going to be playing with the lead. You're not always going to be able to run the ball like you want. And I say that on the heels of one game sets up everything. It's also play action pass. It helps the offensive line in protection. They're allowed to be aggressive in so many different ways. But what needs to change is the mentality up front. Got to play smarter. And Sharon Moore addressed that at times where, hey, against Oregon, against some of those teams late in the season, when you have run-through linebackers, you have to be able to – you've got to address it. You've got to be able to take your, the proper footwork and not let – mean for for the rest of the offense, and how's it going to adjust the defense. All of those things are a part of what makes this offense go. And so it's the knowledge, it's the experience that you gained up front. And you let's just face it, you're going to have to be a little bit more athletic up front. And I think there's some young tackles, and we saw it in the game, that are going to provide some of that athleticism on the edge, some length on the edge. And then when you start talking about the passing game, and again, Sharon has addressed it in recruiting. You need some size. You got a 6'3" receiver coming in. Now, I don't necessarily know that you're going to lean on him as a freshman as your number one receiver, but then you go to the portal and you bring in some guys that are good athletes that have experience, and you're going to have to be able to stretch the field. That's going to help that run game as well. So you're going to, and the continue to utilize. There might not be a more talented and deep group on this team, offensively, defensively, or special teams, than the tight end room. I know you're losing Colston Loveland, but you got Hogan. You got a whole bunch of tight ends in that room that are going to be really good. And the more that you can utilize them down the field, the receivers down the field, makes this offense much more dangerous. And it allows the offensive coordinator to call things that, that you can set up for quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter when you need to give a different look.
Number 4 on our 7 from 77. Let's talk about Davis Warren's injury and where this quarterback room sets. Obviously, a bummer from Warren's perspective, suffering that torn ACL in the ReliaQuest Bowl. And we all kind of knew that it was going to be a unique challenge for him to go from 24 to 25 as QB1 because of some of the moves that Michigan has made, headlined by the star incoming freshman in Bryce Underwood. We discussed it a little bit before the bowl game about I wanted to make sure Michigan fans, and I think they really do, appreciate what this young man did. He has a unique place in Michigan football history for what he's done. He has one of the best stories in all of college football. But what I'm curious about, when you suffer a torn ACL in January, or sorry, late December in this case, that's really tough to come back from and be a viable contributor the next year. I don't care where you are on the depth chart, but he's indicated he's coming back to the program for 2025. Whether he's playing or not, I do think he's a valuable member of this team.
Oh, there's no question he's a valuable member. And the experience that he gained this year, the experience of being benched, the experience of being on the field, of playing against teams like USC and some of the other teams that he's faced, whether he was on the field or not. And I mean, he's a valuable asset to have that room. And I love Davis Warren. I don't think anybody can question his love for Michigan, his desire to get a Michigan degree. Those are all things that you love to see. But as a player, sometimes do step away. And we saw that in the middle of the season when he was forced to the bench. He came back a different player. And was he perfect? No. But there are lessons that you learn in that he can share with the rest of the quarterback room, has eyes, along with Chip Lindsey, along with the rest of that quarterback room on the sidelines, and seeing things as a quarterback that's been on the field, I think will be a huge asset whoever that starting quarterback is, when they come to the sideline, he'll be an asset for them on game days as well.
Number 5 on our 7 from 77, some roster news between the ReliaQuest Bowl victory and now Michigan officially announcing a couple more acquisitions. Defensive lineman Trey Williams from Clemson. He has 1 year of eligibility. He's joining the program. It wasn't official during the ReliaQuest Bowl lead up, but we all knew based on the reports that Alabama running back Justice Haynes would be coming to Michigan. He's going to be in his 3rd collegiate season in 2025. Also, some notable stops and decisions in the portal for former Wolverines. Tyler Morris heading to Indiana, certainly a fascinating one there. And UNLV, the destination for quarterback Alex Orji, who finished off that Michigan victory over Alabama after the Warren injury. Just your takeaways from those news and notes, or anything else roster-wise since the last time we spoke.
A lot of respect for the guys that were wearing the Mesa Blue that no longer are. We'll always remember Tyler Morris and the plays that he made in the Rose Bowl against Alabama. Alex Orji, an unbelievable athlete. And we wish those guys all the best of luck and all the success at their next destination, except if they play Michigan, obviously. And they're great kids. Doesn't change who they are. All it is change the jersey that they're wearing. And both of them are great kids. There's going to be a lot of them that we're talking about over the course of not just this year, but in years to come because of the movement in college football. But to be able to get a running back like Justice Haynes and adding him to the guys that we've already talked about, Jordan Hall, like you can never have too many good running backs. You can never have too much experience in that room. And the competition is going to drive all those guys to be even better And I'm really excited about some of those guys. And Trey Williams, when you're coming from a program like Clemson, that is known for having a good defensive front. I mean, how many first-round picks have had on that defensive line? And I don't know that Trey Williams ever be that guy, but to be able to be around that, you pick up, trick techniques and lessons learned, and he's going to bring a lot of those things with him to Ann Arbor.
Time for number 6 on our 7 from 77. John, I know you like Saturdays in the fall and coming out of the tunnel, but as I've gotten to know you over the years, I know that you are most passionate and you most miss winter conditioning, right?
Yeah, that's probably not at the top of the to-do list. Maybe it is now, since I'm old guy just trying to get back into some sort of shape, and trying to get back into a bathing suit season. But no, it's one of those things as a young player. And if you're Blake Frazier, if you're any of those young offensive linemen that are early enrolled, defensive linemen, this is an opportunity for you to really get into that weight room, to get with Abigail and the nutrition staff, change your body. And this is the time of year to set some of those goals and really change what you are now, even before spring ball. And that's where so many games and so many different things can happen. And what you want to do next fall is really determined by what you do and how you do it at this time of the year. And it's really, especially for those big guys up front. But in terms of, we talk about the receivers and the running, it's speed, it's quickness, it's change of direction, it's preparing your body for a Big Ten season. All of those things are done now. And it's not the sexy thing to do. And it's not, nobody really sees. We will talk about it occasionally through the year when we get a chance to talk to the strength staff or the nutrition staff, who's really invested, who's really changed the body, and to be able to hear the metrics and the way that they could track all of that now versus just, hey, how much are you lifting or how much has your body changed? There's really obvious ways to be able to measure the growth and measure how guys have changed. So it is an exciting time. It's not the top of the list on the calendar. It doesn't rival, the last Saturday in November. Pro day. These guys are going to get some good experience by seeing some of these other guys go through it. They'll get tested in those same drills, but there's a lot to be gained at this time of the year.
And how many times, how many times do we hear it during the stretch run, how important winter conditioning is to those victories, to those opportunities down the stretch? All right, number 7, our last one here on our 7 from 77. Hey, we had Jason Avon on here after the win in Columbus. I know some asked the question if this was going to happen, and you could see him, Jason, in a few of the social media videos after the win over Alabama. But shout out Sharon Moore and the football program giving Jason Avon a game ball from the Ohio State win at the ReliaQuest Bowl. We talked about it with Jason. I mean, he travels back and forth from Philadelphia because Michigan and this program and this community means so much to him. It was a really, really cool gesture for Jason because, hey, he kept the flag. He deserves a game ball, right?
He does. Saved it from destruction down there in Columbus. And you know what? The video was fun. That game was fun. Everything that came out of it, and the fact that Jason got a little notoriety out of it is it's invaluable to him and to this program. And here's why. Because here's what I love about Sharon doing that. Sharon understands that, yeah, the starting quarterback position is a little bit more than the sideline reporter. It means a little bit more in terms of what happens on Saturdays. But he values everybody's contribution to the program, all the way from the sideline reporter to the voice, the play-by-play, the guy. Everybody in that building feels valued by Sharon Moore, and they're going to do everything they possibly can to allow this team to be ready. And I don't know that every once at the end of the year, right, we say the platitudes, right? And I try and talk as much as I can about the job that you do, and in organizing and getting everything ready for the podcast, the questions for 7 from 77, the fake and facts, all of those different things. But Jason, and we talk about those things with Jason, the one thing I will say about him is he comes over prepared every single time, whether he's joining us here on the podcast, the pregame show, on the sidelines, the postgame. He does everything that you got to do, all the small things of studying the film and understanding the defenses and the routes that the receivers are running. He's been a great value add to the broadcast listener and the conversations that we have during the game. Doug and I can have some of those, but they're made even more richer with more value because of the stuff and the experience that Jason is willing to share. So glad to see that he got that game ball, and I think there's a lot of people in that building who recognize that Sharon does have his eye out, that he is watching everybody, and everybody feels valued. It may not they may not have gotten that game ball, but it kind of felt like he was giving one to everyone.
Yeah, nobody smiles more at games pre, in, post than Jason Avant. He is a joy to have around. So we're very fortunate for that. We are going to bring you more of these Tuesday streams as we go along throughout the course of the offseason. Probably not every week, but I think pretty consistently. Somewhere in the 10:30 to 11 a.m. range on Tuesdays. We'll have some special guests. We'll have some different interviews, some different topics. We do encourage you to check out the audio version of In the Trenches presented by Meyer coming up on Wednesday morning, where you'll get me and John's perspective on the college football playoff. Obviously, a noteworthy national championship game for Michigan fans, and certainly one that, has two teams that are rivals, but also at a unique time in both of those rivalries. So we'll talk about that on Wednesday's episode of In the Trenches. Thanks to all those for enjoying this one. Thanks for dealing with some of the audio and technical difficulties, but we will continue to push forward with all your In the Trenches, all your Michigan football coverage here on the Michigan Athletics YouTube and on X at John Jansen 77. But that's it for us. Great to be back at this, and we'll talk to you again next week here on M Go Blue Podcasts.